The sun is setting over the Roman countryside. It is April in the year 65 AD. A tribune of the Praetorian Guard named Granius Silvanus walks at the head of a column of soldiers. They are not marching toward a battlefield. They are marching toward a villa 4 miles south of Rome, where an old man is sitting down to dinner with his wife. The tribune carries no weapon drawn, only a message. But the message is from Emperor Nero, and messages from Nero in the spring of 65 AD are death sentences. The old man's name is Seneca. He is 69 years old. He has been the most famous philosopher in the Roman world for 3 decades. He has been an advisor to emperors, a playwright, a senator, and a teacher. Tonight, he will become something else. Tonight, Seneca will die, and the way he chooses to die will be remembered for 2,000 years. To understand the weight of this final evening, you need to understand the life that led to it. Lucius Annaeus Seneca was born around 4 BC in Corduba, in what is now southern Spain. His father was a wealthy rhetorician. His family moved to Rome when Seneca was still a child, and from an early age he showed an extraordinary mind. He studied philosophy under the Stoic teacher Attalus, who taught him that true wealth was not gold or land, but mastery over oneself. Seneca rose quickly. He became a successful lawyer, a senator, and one of the most admired orators in Rome. But Rome was not kind to brilliant men. In the year 41 AD, the Emperor Claudius, manipulated by his wife Messalina, banished Seneca to the island of Corsica on a charge of adultery. A charge most historians believe was fabricated. For 8 years, Seneca lived in exile. 8 years on a barren rock in the Mediterranean. Most men would have been destroyed by this. Seneca wrote some of his finest work. His essays on anger, on the shortness of life, on the consolation of philosophy, many were composed here in isolation, with nothing but his mind and the sea. He wrote to his mother Helvia, consoling her for his exile. Think about that. The man in exile consoling the woman at home. That is Stoicism, not the absence of suffering, the refusal to be defined by it. In 49 AD, everything changed. Claudius married a new wife, Agrippina the younger. She was ambitious, calculating, and she had a son from a previous marriage, a boy named Nero. Agrippina recalled Seneca from exile with a single purpose: tutor her son, prepare him to rule. Seneca was 53 years old. He had lost 8 years of his life to exile. Now he was being handed the education of the future emperor. He accepted for the next 5 years. Seneca shaped the mind of the boy who would become emperor. He taught him rhetoric, philosophy, clemency. When Nero took the throne in 54 AD at the age of 16, Seneca and the Praetorian prefect, Burrus, became his closest advisors. What followed was something remarkable. The first 5 years of Nero's reign, historians call it the Quinquennium Neronis, were among the most just and prosperous in Roman memory. Tax reforms, legal protections, restraint in foreign policy. Even the later Emperor Trajan would call these 5 years the finest period of Roman governance. And behind much of it stood Seneca. But this is not the story of a golden age. This is the story of what happens when a student outgrows his teacher and becomes a monster. The change was gradual, then sudden. Nero began to resent the boundaries Seneca had set. He wanted to sing on public stages. He wanted to race chariots. He wanted to be worshipped not as an emperor, but as an artist. Seneca counseled restraint. Nero chose spectacle. In the year 59 AD, Nero crossed a line from which there was no return. He ordered the murder of his own mother, Agrippina, the woman who had placed him on the throne, the woman who had recalled Seneca from exile. The details are horrifying. Nero first tried to kill her in a rigged boat designed to collapse at sea. When Agrippina survived, swimming to shore, he sent soldiers to finish the job. According to the ancient sources, when the assassins arrived, Agrippina bared her womb and told them to strike there first, the womb that had given birth to Nero. Seneca knew. The whole of Rome knew, and Seneca made a choice that would haunt his reputation forever. He helped Nero draft a letter to the Senate justifying the murder. This is the stain on Seneca's legacy. The philosopher of virtue helping a tyrant explain away matricide. Was it survival? Was it the last attempt of a teacher to maintain some influence over a student spiraling into madness? Historians have debated this for 2,000 years. There is no clean answer. What is clear is that from this moment forward, Seneca's position became impossible. He was advisor to a man he could no longer advise. He was philosopher to a court that no longer valued philosophy. Nero murdered his first wife, Octavia, in 62 AD. He kicked his pregnant second wife, Poppaea, to death in 65 AD. He performed on stage while senators were forced to applaud. He competed in chariot races and declared himself the victor, even when he fell from his chariot and failed to finish. Seneca tried to leave twice in 62 AD and again in 64 AD. He offered Nero his entire fortune, everything he had accumulated, and asked permission to retire from public life. Both times, Nero refused. He embraced Seneca, told him he was valued, and kept him close. This was not affection. This was control. Nero kept his enemies where he could see them. Then in July of 64 AD, Rome burned. The Great Fire consumed 10 of Rome's 14 districts, and in the ashes, Nero saw opportunity. He began construction of his Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a palace complex so vast it swallowed entire neighborhoods. The people of Rome whispered that Nero himself had started the fire. To silence them, Nero blamed the Christians. He had them covered in animal skins and torn apart by dogs. He had them burned alive in his gardens, their bodies used as human torches to light the night. This was the Rome that Seneca lived in. This was the emperor he had helped create. By the spring of 65 AD, a group of powerful Romans decided that Nero had to die. The plot was organized around Gaius Calpurnius Piso, a senator known for his charm, his wealth, and his popularity. The plan was straightforward: assassinate Nero during the games at the Circus Maximus and declare Piso emperor, backed by sympathetic officers in the Praetorian Guard. More than 40 men were involved: senators, knights, soldiers, even one of Nero's own commanders. It was the largest conspiracy against a sitting emperor in Roman history. But conspiracies are only as strong as their weakest member. A freedman named Milichus betrayed the plot to Nero on the eve of its execution. Under interrogation, conspirator after conspirator gave names. The net spread. Arrests began. Nero's response was swift and merciless. Piso was ordered to kill himself. He did. Senators were executed. Officers were stripped of command. The poet Lucan, Seneca's own nephew, was ordered to open his veins. As he bled to death, he recited his own poetry about a dying soldier. Then Nero turned his attention to Seneca. There was almost no evidence against him. A conspirator named Natalis had mentioned visiting Seneca once to discuss Piso. That was all. But Nero did not need evidence. He needed an excuse, and the conspiracy gave him one. The tribune Granius Silvanus was dispatched to Seneca's villa to deliver the verdict. Tacitus notes a bitter detail. Silvanus himself had been one of the conspirators. He was now delivering a death sentence on behalf of the man he had plotted to kill. He took the long way to the villa, and in the end, he could not face Seneca himself. He sent a centurion in his place. It is the evening of April, 65 AD. Seneca is at his villa, roughly 4 miles south of Rome. He has recently returned from Campania. He is at supper with his wife Pompeia Paulina and 2 close friends. The meal is simple. Seneca has always eaten simply. This is when the soldiers arrive. A centurion enters the dining room and delivers Nero's command. Seneca is to take his own life. There will be no trial, no appeal, no delay. According to Tacitus, Seneca was unmoved. His first act was practical. He asked for writing tablets to inscribe his will, to provide for his friends and dependents. The centurion refused. A condemned man's estate belonged to the emperor. Seneca turned to his friends, and what he said next has echoed through 20 centuries. Since I am forbidden to show gratitude for your friendship, I leave you the only thing I still possess, and the finest thing I ever possessed, the pattern of my life. If you remember it, you will win a name for moral worth and steadfast friendship. His friends were weeping. Seneca rebuked them, gently at first, then firmly. Where are your maxims of philosophy? Where is the preparation of so many years' study against evils to come? Who among us did not know Nero's cruelty? After the murder of his mother and his brother, nothing remains but to add the destruction of his guardian and his tutor. Then Seneca turned to his wife. Pompeia Paulina was decades younger than him. He asked her to temper her grief, to find consolation in the memory of a life lived well, to survive him. Paulina refused. She told him that she too had resolved to die, that she would not live in a Rome without him, under an emperor who murdered philosophy along with philosophers. Seneca did not argue. Tacitus records that he said, "I had shown you the comforts of life, but you prefer the glory of death. I will not grudge your example. Let the courage of this brave end be shared equally between us both, though yours shall win the greater fame." Together they cut the veins on their arms. But death did not come quickly for Seneca. He was old. His body was thin from years of simple living. The blood flowed slowly. He cut deeper into his legs behind his knees. Still, his body held on. Seeing his wife suffering, both from her own wounds and from watching his struggle, Seneca ordered her to be taken to another room. Even in dying, he was protecting her from pain. What Seneca did not know was that Nero had given a separate order. Paulina was not to die. Her death would bring too much public sympathy against him. When she lost consciousness from blood loss, soldiers entered and bandaged her wounds. She survived. Tacitus writes that she lived several more years, her face and limbs permanently pale from the blood she had lost that night. Still alive, still bleeding too slowly, Seneca asked his friend Statius Annaeus to prepare a poison, the same poison used in Athens to execute condemned men. Hemlock. He drank it. But the poison too had little effect. His body was too cold, his circulation too weak for the hemlock to spread. Finally, Seneca asked to be carried to his bath. He entered the warm water, hoping the heat would open his veins and speed the end. As the water turned red around him, he sprinkled some of it on the slaves nearby. His last words, according to Tacitus, "I offer this liquid as a libation to Jupiter the Liberator." Then Seneca died. He was cremated without ceremony, as he had requested long before. No procession, no monument, no spectacle. In a city ruled by a man obsessed with performance, Seneca's final act was the refusal to perform. 2,000 years later, we still read Seneca's words. We still quote his letters. We still reach for his philosophy when life feels unbearable. But here is what makes Seneca different from most philosophers you will ever encounter. He did not merely write about courage. He was tested. He did not merely theorize about facing death with dignity. He faced it. On a spring evening, with soldiers at his door and an empire turning against him, he practiced what he had spent a lifetime preaching. Was Seneca perfect? No. He accumulated enormous wealth while writing about the virtues of poverty. He helped a tyrant justify the murder of his own mother. He was a man of contradictions, like every person who has ever tried to live by ideals in an imperfect world. But in the end, when it mattered most, Seneca chose to die as he had taught others to live. With clarity, with calm, with the understanding that the only thing we truly own is how we meet our fate. He wrote these words years before that final evening. But it is as if he wrote them for himself and for us. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements, if it were all well invested. But when it is wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, we are forced at last by death's final constraint to realize that it has passed away before we knew it was passing. This is the still voice. If these words found you when you needed them, share them with someone else who does.